Man, what did I get myself into? It took me so long to make the video of Limelight, I was like, I'll have no problem making another video. Hell, it'll be faster. But then, I decided to talk about Contempt. It was kind of a wild journey to go back to it. After doing my first video, I felt like some kind of weird pressure about doing the second one. I also felt like some kind of imposter. Contempt is a complex movie. When you're making these videos, you never want to sound dumb. Also, you don't want to retold everything that has been already said about the movie. And unlike Limelight, a lot of people did reviews of Contempt. So I'll admit it, I kind of hit the wall with Contempt. And then I had this kind of weird revelation. By doing a lot of research about the movie, I found the most interesting thing. Jean-Luc Godard thought that Contempt was a simple film, maybe the most simple film of his entire filmography. And this gave me the angle I kind of needed for this video. If Godard thought his movie was simple, let's try to see the movie from his perspective. And as Fritz Lang says it in the film Contempt, every movie needs a point of view. The same thing goes for this little video essay. Of course, in order to talk about Contempt, we need to put the movie into perspective. And it's impossible to talk about Godard without talking about the French New Wave. Everything started in 1951 with the creation of Les Cahiers du Cinéma. It was a magazine that was created to just talk about movies that was from France and from around the world. A lot of the people that collaborates with Les Cahiers du Cinéma are French directors that you probably heard of. Éric Rohmer, Jacques Rivette, Claude Chabrol, François Truffaut, and Jean-Luc Godard. In 1954, François Truffaut completely shook the pillars of the temple by releasing Une certaine tendance du cinéma français in Les Cahiers du Cinéma. It was shocking because Truffaut was pointing the laziness of the current French cinema at the time. He was also advocating for the notion of the author, so that instead of relying only on your script and dialogues, you will rely on your director as the author of your movie, so that he's gonna have a certain artistic vision when he's gonna make the film. That article pretty much kickstarted the French New Wave. Those young, bold, educated movie aficionados have now a chance to show what they could do. Two movies were the pamphlets of the French New Wave when it started. They were not necessarily the first movies of the French New Wave, but they were the perfect representation of the French New Wave ideology. Those two movies were Les 400 coups from François Truffaut and also Breathless à bout de souffle from Jean-Luc Godard. On a personal note, these two films are also some of my favorites of all time, so I would highly suggest that you watch these.
Si vous n'aimez pas la ville, allez vous faire foutre.
Those two great films had little budget, a lot of creativity, and a lot of innovation in terms of the technique of filming, and they were also narratively completely different than your usual movie in theater. Their biggest influences were mostly Hollywood classic movies, but also the neo-realism genre that was created after World War II in Italy. Overall, it was a really influential movement. Some of your favorite directors might have influences of New Wave cinema in their movies. But at the beginning of the 60s, the French New Wave gradually lost interest among the movie buffs, but also the directors of the movement. Le Mépris, or Contempt, classifies itself as a New Wave film, but some will also argue that it was also the film signaling the end of this cinematic genre. At the time of the film, although the movement was losing strength in the cinematic world, Godard was still a promising and popular director in France. Godard not only wanted to make a bigger and more prestigious film, he wanted to achieve his dream of making a Hollywood-style film with a great actress. By working with internationally renowned producers, Godard was giving a budget of $1 million, about as much money as his last 5 films combined. But the money was not the only golden opportunity for working on Contempt. He finally got the opportunity to work with a huge star because Brigitte Bardot accepted to work on the movie. A lot of people tend to forget how immensely popular Brigitte Bardot was at the time. At the beginning of the 60s, she was definitely the most popular French celebrity. She was also, without a doubt, a total sex symbol. And while she started acting by the late 50s, she wasn't respected as an actress yet. So Contempt was a huge opportunity for her. And working with a young and promising director that can really showcase her talent, it was a logical choice to go for this film. Contempt is an adaptation of the novel by Alberto Moravia. Godard promised the author to respect the novel despite the insistence of his producers for a more traditional and seductive film. Godard ultimately adapted the film around his actors and himself rather than the original novel. As we will discover it more through this video, Contempt is a film that was the source of a lot of conflicts and a lot of disappointment. Contempt follows the story of a screenwriter named Paul Javal, who is hired to rewrite the script for a film adaptation of Homer's The Odyssey. He is hired by a womanizing, wealthy, and powerful producer named Prakash. Pretty much right off the bat, Prakash seems to be interested in the wife of Paul, the beautiful Camille. And Paul kind of threw Camille right into the arms of Prakash. Immediately after that, Camille seems to have contempt for her husband. Their relationship seems to be deteriorating quickly, but Paul still insists on bringing Camille to Capri for the filming of the movie. In Capri, Camille officially leaves Paul, telling him that she no longer feels anything for him. The later will even see his wife kiss Prakash and leave Capri with him. Moments later, Camille and Prakash are in a terrible car accident, killing them both instantly. Paul hears the news and leaves Capri completely devastated. That's a really quick and simple summary, but Contempt is not a film that accumulates action, but rather moments. What is the most striking is that Contempt is a film with a storyline limited to a few action, but which proves to have an impressive density of analysis. And the best way to prove it is with the opening sequence of the film. If you don't remember it, and I would be surprised if you do, Godard begins the film with a fixed camera showing a traveling towards the viewer, all with a narration that describes many elements of the movie. Some people really love the first line of a novel, what we call the incipit. I also tend to really like the first scene of a film, which often means many things. With this specific way of opening the movie, Godard says that from the start, this is a film. But on the contrary, by presenting his film in this way, with a camera that reaches us, Godard attempts to mix the car between reality and fiction, a technique that he will use extensively during the film. It seemed like from the get-go, Godard wants to show us that this is art, but this is also life. I think a lot of people will remember that beautiful quote in the opening sequence. Le cinéma substitue à notre regard un monde qui concorde à nos désirs. Le mépris est l'histoire de ce monde. Which translate into, cinema replaces our view with a world that corresponds to our desires. Contempt is the story of this world. This sentence means a lot when we analyze the film more deeply. Godard wanted to legitimize cinema as an art, as a representative of the new wave. This introduction is the best way to do it. By saying how the film is made, who directs it, who plays in it, he sends the message that this is a work of art, not a story to forget yourself as a spectator, and also that this is his reality put on film. The opening scene shows a technical audacity that will be reflected in the entire film. For example, the music, completely omnipresent in the film to different degrees. In many scenes, the music is just too loud. It sometimes prevents you from hearing the dialogue. Sometimes she cuts suddenly to create a strange distancing. We sometimes forget that music helps us integrate into the action of a film. Godard showed how to do the complete opposite. There is also this scene during a wild performance when the sound goes from extremely loud to completely silent when focusing on the conflict between Camille and Paul.
I reread The Odyssey last night.
And then becomes extremely loud again. The effect is powerful. From Paul's perspective, his conflict with his wives occupies a huge part of his own reality. Godard stages the dichotomy of his own world and the real world. To continue the technical aspect, Godard has, in Contempt, completely reinvented the way of filming space. He magnified the simple apartment, and the scene almost looked like a grandiose epic. The apartment is the heart of the film. It is the most honest expression of the feelings of the couple of Paul and Camille. Here, the apartment, although small, is filmed almost like a labyrinth where Paul pursues Camille. To add to the grandeur of the thing, Godard filmed moments in the apartment in CinemaScope, a camera mainly used to film grandiose landscape, notably westerns. Godard gives this marital conflict filming effects to add to his personal importance to the characters. This is not, however, Godard's only innovative process to add to the artistic scope of his film. During the long conflict between the two main characters in the apartment, Godard uses a splendid technique to make one of his dialogue more lively. He films this dialogue without cutting, moving the camera slowly from right to left and left to right to keep the discussion authentic. an effect often used by Sergio Leone in his westerns or in certain Japanese action films to add to the intensity of a moment. Another filmic element that is important to highlight from this very important part of the film is the way of filming in general for the footage. Godard films this couple in conflict as if we are spying on an intimate scene. The idea is not to make a beautiful classic cinema shot, but to use space to accentuate the intimacy of the moment. Character could be at one hand of the shot in a door frame while the other could be behind a wall. Some have attributed it to Contempt artistic intentions resembling painting. We can actually see resemblances of several shots of the film with paintings by Johannes Vermeer, for example. In his paintings, the action sometimes seems to be through a keyhole. You just need to have eyes to realize that Contempt is a film with absolutely incredible aesthetics. I think my favorite shot in the film is the moment where Paul, on the side of the screen, looks at the sea for a long time. It is not only visually striking, but it is also a shot with powerful symbolism when compare Paul with the character of Ulysses, a recurring theme in the film. It therefore seems to me that the assertion that Le Mépris is a simple film holds little water from my analytical perspective. There are too many innovations and creativity to make this a common or easy film. Godard's unique and non-conforming production is a fascinating gesture of artistic resistance through a cinema that films immobility with finesse. Except that we must now explain how, in the eyes of Jean-Luc Godard, Contempt is a film of great simplicity. What must be said from the get-go is that for Godard, Contempt was not only a simple film, it was a film without mystery where everything is on the table. It would be an Aristotelian film, stripped of appearances. The characters are not hiding anything, they only are. We come back to Bazin's phrase, Godard staged the world as he wanted to show it. And just like the sea that he loves to show in the film, everything is in front of us, in its greatest simplicity. For Godard, nothing is to be elucidated in Contempt, you just have to see and feel. For example, the scene where Prokofiev drives into the film for the first time, speeding against the couple, is not an allegory of things to come, but rather the producer's pure and true desire to get Camille. And this simplicity spreads throughout the film through the ways of being of Paul and Camille. Paul starts the film by saying that he totally loves Camille. Moments later though, he treats leaving her alone with her producer indifferently. Some might even say contemptuously. When Camille asks him, "What happened to you, Paul?" when he left her alone with a womanizing producer, his excuses are not even credible. Without wanting to enter into a game of values between men and women, many of Paul's actions in the film fuel an obvious contempt from his wife. And if we can definitely consider Camille to be a capricious, strong-headed woman, we can definitely understand her irritation at times. The facts are there before our eyes in great simplicity. Paul tried to make advances to his producer's assistant. At a time when Camille wants to be alone, he imposes himself into the room. He listens to her telephone conversation. He hits her. He almost forces her to have sex with him. Is this enough to awaken a little contempt in you? To all this must be added Paul's quest to understand his wife's reaction. His perception of the truth is not the same of his wife's, just as if we continue to draw a parallel with Homer's Odyssey, Ulysses and Penelope see the same situation from two different points of view. For example, a moment that I particularly appreciate is when Camille drops dishes on the floor and Paul hears nothing. Clearly, we want to show that the two are not on the same wavelength. What is the most striking, however, is that we learn at the end that Paul knew the reason for Camille's frustration all along. He had the opportunity to confront the problem and does not do so. If you are observant, you will notice, like me, that Paul's look during certain scenes suggests that he is well aware of the situation, despite the fact that he suggests that he does not understand anything. The truth, and we will explore it in depth later in the video, is that Godard tried to rationalize the problems of his own relationship through the film. He films the expression of female emotion as an uncontrollable force of nature. Godard cannot accept that Camille leaves Paul for a logical reason, but rather by a natural force uncontrollable and inconceivable to man. By presenting the conflict this way, he simplifies the relationship between men and women by explaining that the two are simply too different. This is why Godard considers his film extremely simple, because he presents humanity from his perspective, which he considers without any subtlety. Because simplicity in Godard's eyes in Contempt is completely different from that of any ordinary person. The simplicity in Contempt is radical. The story is there to show the truth of the world. We quickly notice that the characters in the film do not speak like ordinary human beings. We mostly have the impression that that they simply say whatever comes to their mind. Whatever our position in relation to Godard cinema is, this way of doing and exposing his characters give Contempt a dreamlike aspect which had to the collective fascination of movie lovers for this ambitious film. But simplicity isn't just limited to the characters. The slowness of Godard's cinema and his obvious desire to give his shots time to breathe add a peaceful and contemplative aspect to this simple experience. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that creating these beautiful shots is easy, but several moments in Contempt bring us back to an immobility, to a truth that the characters live. There is no secret in Contempt. There is only the surface that offers what it offers. Epic and magnificent. Perhaps you find that I'm getting lost in this delirium of complexity and simplicity, but that's literally what fascinates me the most about this film. However, I think that we can reach a conclusion regarding the initial question. Is Contempt a simple film? My answer is yes, but by being so radically simple on several creative levels, the films gain in analytical content. It is also one of the most technically innovative films of the 1960s. I think the key here is not to mix simplicity with something that is easy to understand.